Imagine holding a small silver coin in your hand. It feels heavy. It feels real. For centuries, this little piece of metal bought roads, paid armies, and guaranteed peace across 3 continents. It was the ultimate symbol of power. But what happens when the people in charge start quietly shaving off the edges of that coin? What happens when a superpower decides to cheat its own citizens? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about a pattern. It is an absolute mathematical pattern that has brought down every great empire in human history. I am not talking about invasions. I am not talking about barbarians at the gates. I am talking about economic suicide. I am talking about currency collapse. I have spent considerable time analyzing the financial history of Rome, Spain, and Britain, and the sequence is always the same. It starts with military dominance, it moves to overextension, then comes deficit spending, then currency debasement, then inflation, then a total loss of public confidence, and finally, collapse. Today, we will examine the exact mechanics of how the Roman Empire destroyed itself from the inside out. We will identify the emperors who engineered it, and I will outline 5 historical principles that allowed individuals to survive when the system fractured. Let us start with Rome. At its peak, the Roman Empire was a logistical marvel. It maintained 70 million people and a unified currency. The core of this economy was the denarius. Introduced around 211 BC, the denarius was a pure silver coin weighing approximately 4.5 grams. It functioned as the reserve currency of the ancient world. You could travel from the borders of Britain to the deserts of Egypt, and the asset was universally accepted. Why? Because it retained intrinsic value. When a Roman soldier was paid, he received physical silver. He held real purchasing power. But empires require constant capital. Rome relied heavily on military expansion. The state conquered territories, acquired labor, and extracted gold. This funded operations for decades. Eventually, the expansion stopped. The empire reached its maximum sustainable footprint. The influx of external capital dried up, but the structural spending did not. The Roman state had to maintain massive border deployments to secure its territory. They faced a severe fiscal deficit. Without modern debt markets to borrow from, the state had 2 options: raise taxes or cheat the ledger. They chose to cheat. The year is 64 AD. Emperor Nero holds power. A major fire has devastated Rome, and the state requires immediate liquidity to fund reconstruction and sustain the executive lifestyle. So he has a brilliant, terrible idea. What if we melt down the pure silver coins, mix in some cheap copper, and mint more coins? Nero cut the silver content of the denarius from 100% to 90%. It seemed like a small tweak. A 10% cut allowed him to print more money. Problem solved, right? Wrong. He opened Pandora's box. Once a government realizes it can create money out of thin air, it cannot stop. It becomes an addiction. The emperors who followed Nero did the same thing. Caracalla cut the silver down to 50% in 211 AD. By the year 265 AD, under Emperor Gallienus, the mighty denarius contained only 5% silver. It was basically a piece of junk bronze with a thin silver wash that rubbed off in your pocket. Imagine you were a Roman merchant. You are not stupid. You know the new coins are fake. So what do? You demand more coins for the exact same bag of wheat. This is the birth of hyperinflation. Prices exploded. What cost 1 denarius in the year 200 AD cost 50 denarii by 300 AD. In the 2nd century, a measure of wheat cost half a denarius. By the year 335 AD, that same wheat cost over 6,000 denarii. The life savings of the entire Roman middle class evaporated into thin air. The government panicked. In 301 AD, Emperor Diocletian tried to fix the problem by force. He issued the Edict on Maximum Prices. He literally threatened the death penalty for anyone who sold goods above a certain price. Did it work? Of course not. You cannot command value into existence. Merchants simply stopped selling. Goods disappeared from the public markets. Black markets thrived. The economy ground to a complete halt. But the collapse was not just about coins. It was about people. Let me tell you about the Roman citizen farmer. In the early days of the Republic, Rome's strength came from small, independent farmers. They worked their own land. When war broke out, they put down their tools, picked up their swords, and fought for Rome. Think of the legendary hero Cincinnatus. He left his plow to save the state, and when he won, he went right back to his farm. But continuous wars destroyed this system. Farmers were sent on long campaigns for years. While they were gone, their farms fell into ruin. When these veterans finally returned home, they were drowning in debt. They had to sell their land to survive. Who bought the land? The ultra-rich elites. The elites combined these small farms into massive commercial mega-estates called latifundia, and they did not hire the poor veterans to work the land. Why pay a wage when you can use cheap slave labor from conquered territories? The independent Roman middle class was entirely wiped out. Millions of displaced farmers flooded into the city of Rome, becoming an unemployed, angry mob dependent on government handouts. This social collapse changed the military. Because there were no more land-owning farmers to draft, a general named Marius reformed the army in 107 BC. He started recruiting the landless poor. These new soldiers did not fight for the Republic, they fought for their general, because the general promised them loot and land. This direct shift led to warlords like Sulla and Julius Caesar marching their personal armies on Rome itself. Economic inequality destroyed the political system. By the 4th century, the empire was a hollow shell. The government was desperate for taxes. They made it illegal for farmers to leave their land. Professions became hereditary. If your father was a baker, you had to be a baker. The free citizens of Rome were turned into serfs. Meanwhile, the ultra-rich built fortified country estates. They became totally self-sufficient, cutting themselves off from the failing imperial economy. They hired private security. This was the exact moment feudalism was born. When the barbarian tribes finally kicked in the gates in 476 AD, many Romans didn't even fight back. Why would they? The empire had already strangled itself to death. But here is the most fascinating part of the story. The wealthy elites survived. How? Emperor Constantine realized the silver currency was dead. So, in 310 AD, he created a new, pure gold coin called the solidus. The government and the elites strictly used gold. The gold coin held its value, but the government kept printing worthless bronze and silver coins for the poor. The masses suffered hyperinflation, while the elite protected their wealth with hard assets. Does this sound familiar? History shows us this exact cycle again and again. Look at Spain in the 1500s. They conquered the Americas and found mountains of silver. They thought they were the richest empire on earth. But more money does not equal more wealth if you produce nothing. Spain flooded Europe with silver, caused massive inflation, borrowed heavily to fight endless wars, and went bankrupt 4 times in 40 years. The Spanish Empire evaporated. Look at Britain. In 1922, they ruled a quarter of the globe. The British pound was the world's reserve currency. But then came World War I. Britain printed massive amounts of money to fund the war, abandoning the gold standard. Debt skyrocketed, inflation soared, trust eroded. Within a few decades, the British Empire dissolved. And now, look at the United States today. Since 1971, the US dollar has been a pure fiat currency, backed only by government promises. The national debt is soaring past $36 trillion. The central banks print trillions of dollars out of thin air, especially during crises. Inflation eats away at the purchasing power of the middle class. The military is overextended with 800 bases globally. We use digital digits instead of melting silver coins. The technology is different, but the math is absolutely identical. The laws of economics are absolute. You cannot print prosperity. You cannot borrow forever without consequences. So what do? If we are in stage 5 of the imperial collapse cycle, how do we protect ourselves? History gives us the answers. By studying the survivors of Rome, the Weimar Republic, and modern Argentina, we can find 5 unbreakable financial principles. These are not short-term trading tactics. These are absolute principles of survival. Principle 1. Hard assets survive. Paper burns. When a system collapses, paper claims go to zero. A stock is just a claim on a company. A bank deposit is a claim on a bank. But physical assets are real. In 1918, Germany, 100,000 marks made you wealthy. By 1923, it couldn't buy a loaf of bread. But a farm in 1918 was still a farm in 1923. It still grew food. Gold is still gold. Real estate is still real estate. Own things you can touch. Principle 2. Own productive assets, not speculative assets. A speculative asset only has value if someone else is willing to pay more for it later. In a collapse, there are no buyers. A productive asset creates value independently. A rental property provides shelter. A farm produces food. During the Great Depression, speculative stock investors lost everything, but owners of productive businesses survived because people always need basic goods. Principle 3. Debt destroys you. In stable times, debt is leverage. You buy a house, it appreciates, you win. In a collapse, debt is suicide. Your income drops, but your mortgage stays exactly the same. During the 1930s, over 750,000 farmers were foreclosed on because they couldn't pay bank debts. The farmers who owned their land free and clear survived. They lived on what they grew. Zero debt is your ultimate shield. Principle 4. Skills are portable wealth. Governments can tax your land, they can confiscate your gold, they can inflate your cash, but they cannot take the skills inside your head. During the fall of empires, doctors, engineers, mechanics, and builders survived. They could always trade their labor for food. Develop practical skills that produce real value, independent of complex corporate systems. Principle 5. Local trust networks outlast institutions. When banks close and supply chains break, institutions fail. What survives? Your neighborhood. During the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s or the banking freeze in Argentina in 2001, people survived through local networks. Neighbors traded with neighbors. Families shared resources. Modern life isolates us. We rely on huge corporations for food and the state for security. Build a community now. Know your neighbors. I want to be very clear. I am not telling you this to cause panic. I am telling you this because clarity brings power. We do not know exactly when the current global economic cycle will reset. It could take 5 years or it could take 50 years. Collapses do not happen in a straight line. They are slow, agonizing processes of economic mismanagement. But the beauty of these 5 principles is that you do not need to predict the exact timing. If the economy stays stable, owning productive assets and having zero debt will make you wealthy. If the economy collapses, those exact same actions will keep you alive. The Romans believed their empire was eternal. They thought they were immune to the laws of mathematics. They were wrong. History never lies. The costumes change. We wear suits instead of togas, but human nature and economic math remain exactly the same. Look at the warning signs. Understand the real value of money. Take control of your assets, your skills, and your community. If this analysis gave you a new perspective on how the world really works, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We are going to dive much deeper into specific survival tactics in the next video. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp, stay prepared, and remember, history has the answers if you know where to look.